Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Usama, and today we are joined by a very dynamic personality all the way from Seattle. Rubia has been with Microsoft for over a decade now, and currently she's serving in the capacity of a senior product manager. So, in this upcoming episode, not only would we be getting to hear about her reflections from her journey, but we'll also talk to her about the evolution of the role of a product manager as well. So, with that, we'll get started. Rabia, thank you so much for being here with us, and how had your day been so far?
Happy to be here. I'm excited. This is my first podcast. Day's been going busy as usual. Those who
Yeah,
live away from Pakistan know that weekends are much, much busier as compared to weekdays.
absolutely.
Just dropped my son to his Sunday school and
Mhm.
excited to be spending my morning with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, Rabia, first of all, give us a brief rundown of the roles that you've taken in your journey so far. And, what are your general thoughts about the career trajectory that you had so far?
So, like a lot of people who graduated with a computer science degree, we don't really know our strengths or weaknesses. We sort of take it on as a as a developer, and that's how I started my journey. And then I realized that as a developer, I liked coding, I liked technical challenges, but I always wondered, like the work that I'm doing or the product that I'm building,
Hmm.
who is it for? What is it, who is eventually going to benefit from it? And I liked people interactions a lot more than just being able to, code for that matter. And
Hmm.
as I stepped into the industry, I'm grateful. Like very earlier on, I stumbled into a program manager role, which is similar yet different, which
Hmm.
was something that I started with. And then eventually, as the technology evolved, as this role evolved, now we have different variations of the same role, which pretty much means different things to different people.
Hmm.
So again, started as a developer, became a program manager, and now stepped into a core product role. And we can obviously talk more in detail around what are the differences between project
Right.
manager versus program versus a core product manager role that I'm currently in. So
Right.
yeah, always been around technology, always been part of the engineering space, but in different wearing different hats.
Hmm.
But I think um, for me, my calling eventually was as a product manager.
Right. So, if we were to double down on the role of a product manager itself, so in your opinion, what are the general responsibilities of a PM? Like, what are the general expectations from the role? And in your, decade-long career, how have you seen this role to evolve? And now with emerging AI tools and whatnot, how do you think this role is going to evolve even further?
So I think there was a difference, and I do see a difference still around this role compared to like big enterprise companies
Mhm.
versus if you were to compare it with startups, right?
Right.
Um, and previously, when this role was introduced, Microsoft was the first one to bring in a program manager role. And
Mm.
the goal being, they were very early on identified a gap where you have a person who knows how to code, right? And then yet there's nobody who can actually dedicated role that can bring in the voice of the customer to the product that you're building, right?
Okay.
Um, and that's how this program role generated, which was very different than what a project manager role is, which is making sure that the tasks are being done on time and all of those things, and we're meeting milestones. But a product manager role is primarily at the core of it is the customer, right?
Okay.
The answering the why, like why are we
Mhm.
doing what we are doing, and is it the right way to do it, and how do we foresee the future? What are the signals that we are seeing in the industry? What
Mhm.
are the signals we are seeing in the technology, right? And how can we evolve our product to grow with our customer? Like when
Okay.
the product grows, it's actually leading through our customer's journey, which is at the heart of the product, really.
Right.
And over the years, I've seen it evolve considerably to a
Mm-hmm.
degree where, as you know, I also am an advisor and a mentor for the Skydeck program at Berkeley, which is an incubation for startups, right? And I've seen firsthand how critical they value a product manager's role right at the start of a product's journey,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So that is the most considerable difference that I've
Mm-hmm.
seen. And the future only looks bright from here because as new technologies come in, the customer is still going to be, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
looking to see how their needs are going to be met through the products that are out there in the market.
Okay. Right. So after you've started executing in the capacity of a product manager, what kind of myths do you think have been busted for you?
So myths where I felt like if I was going to go to a customer and ask them what they want, they'll tell me what they want, and
Right.
whatever that my team's going to build is going to work right off the bat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I realized that most of the times, even the customer need to be guided in terms of what they really want.
Okay.
So what happened for me was I realized instead of asking them what they really want, the goal really needs to be what problem are they facing in the current journey that needs to be solved instead of
Mm-hmm.
what do you want, the shifting the question to what are your core challenges and
Okay.
not thinking about what you want
Mm-hmm.
is a huge mind shift, which I think is where a product manager's role differs from a developer, right?
Right.
He's so focused on fixing the problem that most of the times, if they're not being guided by the core problem that they're trying to solve, it's
Mm-hmm.
very easy to miss that, right?
Right.
And we've seen that happen over and over where a product is built, which is marketed that it's going to solve, so and so problem. But once the customer starts using it, it's like, no, this is so off from what I was really looking for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the key really is right at the start of it. When you are looking or reaching out to these companies or customers who are in their journey of,
Mm-hmm.
solving a problem, how
Right.
do you get to the core of that problem? And then you work your way backwards to getting to a place where you can offer not just one, but multiple solutions along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually, I think, was like the biggest myth for me, where I was like, okay, I thought it'll be
Yeah.
easier. I could just go ask them what they want, and then we'll
Yeah.
just go from there. But and that's, I
Mm-hmm.
think, where the maturity of this role comes from, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
start off in this role, you learn along the way because you are at the end of the day the brain and the leader for what they call the captain of the ship, right?
Right.
Your developers are going to build what you're telling them the customer needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't nail that down, you're setting yourself up, your customer up, and even the team for failure, which is something that's not going to really fly even midway in the cycle.
Right. Absolutely. So since this role comes with a lot of a strategic importance, I'd say. So in your opinion, if we extrapolate this thought a little further, how does a career path for a product manager looks like? Like for example, for developers, we know that eventually they can become a principal developer and have that bigger responsibility. But for a product manager, how does their corporate growth look like? Like, what kind of roles can they further take after becoming a product manager?
So ideally, I think you would see that in industry depends on, what is important to you. And often than not, when you are a new graduate, you don't really know that till you're actually stepped out in the industry.
Right.
Most of us, I think we start off from a developer mindset because, our core courses or how we've been taught in school is so focused on making sure
Yeah.
we nail that down. That once we do step out in the industry is where you get different kinds of exposures, right?
Right.
So there are two paths, really,
Mm-hmm.
for even a developer versus
Mm-hmm.
a product role. So
Mm-hmm.
you could actually be what they call an individual contributor, where the core skills required is you need to be the subject matter expert on whatever product your team is building, right? That means planning out what the
Mm-hmm.
roadmap would look like, the strategy you're going to use to kind of grow that product, what the
Mm-hmm.
marketing needs to be like, what is the data that you're getting or the signals that you're getting from the market,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can take that back and invest further to grow your product.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a manager aspect of it, right,
Mm-hmm.
where at some point, like a developer who becomes a principal, even a product manager has a same title growth, right? But
Okay.
as a principal manager,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that's similar whether you're a developer or you're a product manager, is
Right.
something that you're not only responsible for the product that you're building, but also you see value to grow the people under you. So let's say in a few years, if I realize that I actually want to be a people's manager,
Mm-hmm.
that means my scope is going to grow, which means like whatever that I'm building, I could pretty much be responsible for two or three products within my organization. And then
Mm-hmm.
not just growing those products, but also if there are
Mm-hmm.
people who are working on those products, how do I make sure that they're set up for success?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I would be sort of judged or calibrated based off what value I'm bringing in their careers, which is actually for a lot of people is their natural calling, where they feel like, for me,
Mm-hmm.
giving back to people, the people that I'm working for, making sure they have the right opportunities to grow as product leaders for
Mm-hmm.
their products is something that adds value to my life beyond just the work itself, which is
Right.
making sure that my product is successful.
Right. Absolutely. So, if I were to ask you in terms of leadership, what are some of the successful leaders that you've witnessed in your career? Like, what kind of traits did they have that you believe really set them up for success?
I think for me, and I've been doing this for a while, right? So right off
Mm-hmm.
the bat, there are some common themes that I've always seen in those leaders. That is the trust that they carry from their team and
Mm-hmm.
transparency. I think
Okay.
for any leader, like even within my own team, if I know that the people that I'm working with can trust that whatever that I'm saying or
Mm-hmm.
the data that I'm building or I'm bringing to the team, or the value of, hey, I think we should focus on XYZ for the next quarter or so,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that's going to help them grow and help the product grow. If I can get the trust of my team to rally behind me, is something
Mm-hmm.
that would exponentially stand you out from your team.
Right.
And the other is like, often than not, these leaders or people who are higher up in the food chain,
Right.
as they call it, have more signals or have more knowledge to share or know about what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the company, what's going on in the partner teams.
Mm-hmm.
And to the best of your knowledge, if you can be that transparent with the team, like if you, for example, in the current scenario, we see that there are a lot of macroeconomic situations going into play, right? We
Right.
could be running into a recessions. There are companies who are laying off people, and that kind of put people on the edge often than not, right?
Right.
And they look up to their leader in times of crisis to let them know, as horrible as the news be, to be the first ones to kind of be transparent about, hey, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen, but this is what I see.
Okay.
And you could be ready for anything, as opposed to, no, everything is fine, we're going to take it.
Yeah.
That sort of eventually makes you
Yeah.
lose respect, right? And
Right.
then no one wants to work for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I think is also critical, but not as I mean, I would still mark it as number three, is um, the depth of knowledge in your domain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter, developer, product. If you know your you know your product, you should know your product more than even the customers. You should know everything, the loopholes, the bad, the good, so people can
Mm-hmm.
look up to you for guidance when they need to, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you have a smart team and if you can hire smart people, they'll figure out a way to solve some of these problems. But from a leader's perspective, they should be able to kind of at least have a good sense of the products that they own, or the domain expert of what they are bringing to the table.
Right. So if you were to talk a little bit more about the technical depth of a product manager, let's say, so in your opinion, let's say if you are a strategic product manager for a very, I would say, a product that is being developed and operated at a very large scale. So what are some of the tips that you might want to share about developing an understanding for a complicated product?
I think what helps is from a product lens, because there's so many moving pieces, and you're sort of responsible for working with multiple teams who are working
Hmm.
on multiple aspects of a product. The goal really is to know to what degree of depth you need to know about each of those segments, right?
Okay.
And as people and as individuals, we tend to get really, and I'm guilty of the same, right? When I'll start looking into something, you could start rabbit holing on one particular segment that you're looking at, right? So
Hmm.
the key really is to know how far you need to go in terms of depth. And as the product
Right.
manager, the goal is the breadth of the product, not really the depth, which is actually another differentiator between a developer, because
Hmm.
the developer is working on that segment. He has to go deep, right?
Right.
Deep enough to know, a lot more. But from a product lens,
Hmm.
as long as you know what degree of depth that you need, because you're not just looking at one segment, you're looking at the
Hmm.
whole spectrum. It's important to know how deep you need to go. I would say, work with your developers to and trust them when they're telling you things, right? Just the
Right.
way they trust you when you bring in data, or when you bring in the customer voice of what they're asking for. You trust them for them to be doing their job, right? You don't need to
Yeah.
know every little detail about the code. You need to know what
Yeah.
that segment does, and that's pretty much it.
Right. And this one might seem a bit cliched, but in today's market, as a product manager, when you're planning and forecasting about the features, and maybe grooming the backlog, is it good to be first in the market, or is it good to deliver a stable product?
I think it depends on what your product is. For example, in my case, and I've worked within Microsoft on two different products, organizations, right? Very different
Right.
way of working.
Yeah.
So in Azure, when I joined the team, it was already a relatively mature product, right?
Right.
So for us, our challenges were very different.
Hmm.
Um, it was more about getting the customer trust around making things stable, reliable.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we knew that all these big customers that have already onboarded onto our platform, we are going to start losing them. So our goals were very different there, um, as opposed to when I joined IoT, right?
Right.
For us, we were like head to
Hmm.
head with our competitor to see who's going to be the first in the market, right? And at that point, when your
Hmm.
product is new, when you're just starting off, which is a lot of common themes that you see in startups, right?
Right.
Um, the key really is like to just throw something out there in the market and see what's sticking and what's not. What is it that our customers are gonna, they're gonna rally behind versus. Um, it's something we need to think further down.
Yeah.
It's going back to the same culture around let's fail fast, right? What does
Right.
that really
Yeah.
mean? If you're very earlier on when your product is new, if you're focused on making sure that it's stable right from the time that you start working on it, you're gonna be not be the you probably won't even have any customers by the time you throw that out in the market, right?
Right. Yeah.
So again, depends on what product and at what life cycle of the product you're in, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so two different approaches depending on where you are.
Right, right, right. So now, if we change the conversation a little bit and make it a bit more employer centric, so now that you've spent a significant portion of your career with Microsoft. What do you think was the best thing about the company that kept your interest there? And in terms of technical innovation, what keeps you motivated at work, especially at Microsoft?
Um, so I think for me, time and again, it has been the values of the company that you're working for. And again, I would tie it to what's going on in the world right now, right?
Right.
You see so many of layoffs happening, starting from Twitter to, Google, and how they handle their employees in different capacities where as an employee you give a lot of your time at work, right? If
Right.
I look at myself, right, I have two kids, I have life beyond work, right?
Right.
And yet there are my work friends that I spend perhaps more time
Mm-hmm.
than I do with my real family, which is 8 to 10 hours in a day. I'm
Right.
actually focused on giving my time, my energy, my thought into the work that I'm doing, the people that I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen Microsoft taking really good care of its people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when COVID hit, right, I was a new mom, with a newborn, right? And Microsoft was one of the first companies that gave us a COVID relief where you could take up to 12 weeks of paid leave to help you figure out what the new balance in your life is going to be, considering, such a huge scale and changes going on all across the world.
Right.
Um, environmental wise, it's the first company that pledged to be a carbon free in in a few years, right? So those are some of the values that I've seen time and again, where Microsoft has sort of kept me as a loyal employee. And you see that a lot. At some point, it's the quality of your life, the people
Mm-hmm.
that you're around that really want you to stick to a company. The second aspect of it, so there were two parts to the question, right? It was, what kept me going, and then the second part, can you?
So
I think.
in terms of technical innovations, because Microsoft
Oh yeah.
always keeps coming up with cool
So
stuff, right?
the yeah, and the
Yeah.
the amazing thing is when I started to work for Microsoft, I remember I had a mentor right earlier on in my career. He said, "There's not even a single product out there in the world that is either not connected one way, shape, or form with Microsoft, or Microsoft has their own version of that product." So you'll
Yeah.
always find some team working within Microsoft on something either similar or
Mm-hmm.
something innovative that that is already Microsoft partnered, right? And you
Yeah.
see that, like, as soon as we saw the whole craze of Chat GPT, you saw
Yeah.
these news coming out with
Yeah.
these partnerships with Open AI and all of these things. And that's the beauty of Microsoft. And the
Yeah.
thing is, you can never really be bored working, because if you are interested in something else, there's a whole spectrum of teams that you can choose from that you think is something that would interest you, right?
Absolutely.
So, and within organizations, it's like going and working for a new company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is something that has always kept me excited. Like, if I get bored, I go work on something else, even within teams.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's a wonderful
Yeah,
place to
that's
be.
pretty exciting to hear about it. So, if we talk about specifically the team that you work with, do you have any cool traditions at work?
In terms of cool traditions, oh yeah. So there's for every year that you have worked for, and that's a company tradition, I would say, which I found out again. Like, every year that you've worked at Microsoft, you are on your work anniversary, you get a pound of something, like pound of
Hmm.
sweets, right? So if you've been
Okay.
there for
Yeah.
5 years, 5 pounds of some dessert, or five
No
pounds of
way.
candy, or 5 pounds. So, and people
Yeah.
look forward to it, and it's like a sort of a celebratory thing. The other thing is, like, I think the connections that you build. So there you would always, and I think a lot of companies do that, but in general, traditionally, you have going away party, for somebody who
Yeah.
served with your team, because they're like
Mm-hmm.
part of your extended family,
Right.
where you kind of do that, set up some time in your schedule, even through
Uh-huh.
during COVID, if there was people, and we've seen that, a lot of online games or something that gives you or your team to unwind together online is something that
Yeah.
we introduced during COVID, and that's a fun way of ending your week within my team, where it's like
Right.
every Friday,
Yeah.
just bring a hot beverage or a beverage and
Yeah.
for an hour and just sit around, have
Mm-hmm.
a good chat or play an online game together, which helps us stay connected now that most of us are remote.
Interesting, interesting. Honestly, I didn't know that before, but it's pretty cool. Like whoever I talk to from one of these big giant companies, honestly, there's something cool going on in every single team. It's really fascinating to hear about it as from an outsider perspective. Um, but moving on and shifting gears a little bit, if we were to talk about academics here, in your opinion, since the time that you've graduated to now, when you work with new grads or new hires, do you think the curriculum is keeping up with what the industry expects? And the reason I'm asking this is because at the time when I graduated, maybe there was a lot more focus on becoming a good programmer. But now that there are these management sort of roles that ties in with developers, do you think schools are now getting advanced in terms of meeting industry's expectations?
I might say something controversial here,
Go
but I'm going to say
ahead.
it anyway. Um, and
Yeah.
the simple plain answer would be no. I think academics and how things are being done even now is still
Hmm.
very core focused on programming.
Hmm.
And to a certain degree, it makes sense because you can't really teach management till you're actually in management, right?
Right. Makes
There,
sense.
there is a side of experience that
Hmm.
comes along with every job, right? What academics do is they establish a baseline for every child, right?
Right.
And then it's up to you how you use that baseline, and also your interest, right? So if you're
Hmm.
interested in something and you have a baseline, you can
Hmm.
work from there, right? Um, so I would say that again, I've mentored a lot of student kids who come as interns at Microsoft. I graduated myself. I didn't really have. I was never one of those,
Hmm.
one of
Yeah.
those what we used to call back in fast those thetas where
Yeah.
3.5 and then
Yeah.
3.8. I was an average kid with average GPA, and it gave me a baseline.
Hmm.
Yet, I think what helped me get where I was is
Hmm.
beyond than just academics, and that's what I see in real life too. You would be working with the smartest person out
Hmm.
there, right? And yet you would see other people around you growing more exponentially than, perhaps the smartest person in the room. And the
Right.
reason is in real life, there are
Hmm.
certain skills that are either part of your personality or you grow into that person.
Hmm.
That is more people centric. That is more understanding and bringing that balance on what's critical when, and making those decisions along your career that help you grow, as opposed to, not the smartest person would always be the
Yeah.
person who would be growing the fastest, right? And that's something
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
you learn over time. Um, and I remember, that because I was not one of those top scorers or medal holders, and it felt like, oh my God, how would I make it work? And then you step in the real world and you realize that everybody has their own skill set, everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses.
Hmm.
The key really is to be self-aware enough to know what you can and cannot do,
Right.
and then the stuff that you can do,
Hmm.
do that better, right?
Right.
And compete with yourself around how I can grow in that space, knowing that this is where I'm good at, right?
Right.
Is something that I learned along the way, and academics can't really teach you, and I think it's perhaps a
Hmm.
little unfair to kind of expect academics to kind of cover a whole spectrum. But I do agree with you that to a larger degree, there needs to be some sort of training around, or a realization that kids now know that they can also invest in themselves or some sort of projects or management skills. I know we used to do one final year project, which was sort of either taken through the industry or
Yeah.
some of those things, but we can definitely do more in that space to help kids be more ready for practical life.
Right. Excellent. So, in terms of young early career professionals and students alike, what are some of the meaningful strategies that you, in your opinion, they should be devising in terms of their career growth? Or what are some of the skills other than, of course, like theoretical knowledge? What are some of the things that you think are really important for their career growth while they are early?
I think, one thing that I suffered through was like, especially in a product role, right? Developers still have relatively easy, and I wouldn't say easy, but at least if you see like
Mhm.
perhaps 2025 jobs or roles open up for a developer, there'll be a one product role, right? And that makes sense because as a product leader,
Mhm.
you're sort of having to do a spectrum of work. You don't need 20, 25 product managers on a single product, right?
Right.
That's a different skill set right there. But I think what I earlier on in my career suffered through was like no matter where I was applying, it was like, how many years of experience do you have? I'm like, I just graduated. Like,
Right.
take a
That's a
chance on me,
universal
right?
problem.
Take a chance on me,
Yeah.
give me that experience. How do you expect me to get that
Yeah.
experience if no one's hiring me, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then, what I ended up doing was like, and this day and age, it's even easier to do that, right? I mean, there's so many websites, freelancing things that you can do while you're actually in school or about to graduate. Internships being one. Take time out. Don't waste your summer watching movies. Take that time to build a skill,
Yeah.
throw a project out there, work for
Mhm.
free if you have to, right? Because
Right.
at the end of the day, what you're gonna see is like, you have something to show. Volunteer, right? There's so many nonprofits out there who are
Mhm.
always looking for people to help them out. And building that along the way, I think, is one of those things that can help you kickstart your career right there, right? And not
Right.
only that, it'll help you be more ready because unless you're working with people, you build that experience or expertise. It'll be that much easier for you when you do join the workforce.
Right. Absolutely. And Rabia, in terms of mentorship, it's really essential for maybe a senior person to kind of have a junior employee have a guided approach in terms of their career growth. So, in your opinion, how should one go about finding the right mentor for themselves?
That's actually a very good question and an interesting one. So, there are, and I'm sure other companies do that a lot. Microsoft has their own mentorship program. If you're part of the mentorship program, they find a mentor for you, right?
Hmm.
And that's a good place to start. Um, but I think don't stop there, right? A lot of
Okay.
times, what I witnessed during my early years in career was like, hey, I would have this meeting with my mentor, right? And we would just, I felt it wasn't really adding value
Hmm.
to my career or my life. Like we didn't really connect. So someone suggested I keep looking, right? Keep looking.
Right.
You have to have a certain connection with the person who can actually not just mentor you from a career perspective, but for I think it's even equally important that someone helps you grow as a person
Hmm.
in life in general, right? And
Yeah.
in order for that to happen, your values need to align. And he should have a good understanding of what success looks like to you. Might be different than what his success looks like for him, right? And
Right.
can he navigate or she navigate through that lens and help you, right?
Right. Right.
So, in that aspect, I would say, if you don't feel like you're connected to
Hmm.
someone at a certain level or you feel there's a miss there, keep looking and eventually, something will connect, right? And when you do find the right mentor, um, that is when you would know, right? Just when I
Yeah.
found the right mentor, I knew that, this is the person I wanted to be connected to beyond just work,
Hmm.
but also somebody who can not just help me grow in my career, but also help me grow as a person. So that's one. The other thing I would like to add here is having a mentor at work is one thing, right?
Hmm.
Another critical piece that people miss is having a right sponsor, right? And for me, if I was to look back, right, I would say go for a sponsor as opposed to a mentor. And what I mean by a sponsor is um, somebody who would vouch for you when you're not in the room, right?
Right.
And what that really means is like if that person is in a conversation with somebody and they're looking for somebody to either lead a team or take on some critical product, someone who knows you enough to say, hey, I know Rabia, she's been doing this XYZ for a while, she's good
Yeah.
at XYZ, she's good at collaboration, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
And I think she'll be a very good fit for this role. So he has already
Yeah.
vouched for you when you're not even in the room, and people who didn't even know that you exist, they're like, okay, can you help us connect to her, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's how I got my second gig here and Microsoft, right? I mean, I didn't
Hmm.
know, so there was just people who I'd worked with, and not really being a sponsor ended
Yeah.
up vouching for me and having
Hmm.
those clear expectations for people that you're working. Hey, if some
Yeah.
interesting things come your way, can you let me know, right?
Right. Yeah.
Often than not, we don't really talk about those things because we think like, hey, maybe if it's the right time they'll say it, but it's always better to say it if that's something important. For example, if you want to eventually be a people's manager and you're
Yeah.
good at IC, make sure your manager knows, make sure the people that you work with, like, hey, if there's
Yeah.
a role that opens up, it'll be amazing if you could give me a chance, right?
So now that we're reaching the end of our conversation, Rabia, I want you to finish the conversation on some remarks about PWIC. In my opinion, that was I attended one of the conferences that they held, and that's where I first got to know about the term sponsor and a mentor, like in professional terms. So I want you to shed some light on the contributions that they've made and what is it all about.
Oh,
Over to
okay.
you.
Um, PWIC, I think they're doing a remarkable work. I remember, it's incredible the women who are leading the organization and how there are so many volunteers around the world who are helping women break in to the industry or help them grow in their careers. For me, I think one of the critical pieces that I really admire about them is the program around the career mentorship for
Right.
targeted for new graduates. So they help with your resume if you want to do a mock interview. They go through the whole career fair, which lasts about 2 or 3 days. It tends to happen every year,
Hmm.
and there's so many volunteers from the industry who join in to help out. So even if that's not happening, you can always reach out to any one of the members there, and they'll be more than happy to set aside time for you, um, you know,
Right.
through your resume and guide you. The other aspect of it, which is actually way more closer to my heart, is around the maternity mentorship. I did something
Hmm.
similar with Azure Maternity, where women who, after they have a baby, choose to take a career break to focus on their family, and then after a couple of years are looking to come back into the industry. They
Hmm.
have a wonderful way of, helping you do that again
Right.
through looking at your resume, helping you there, doing mock interviews, showing you, what are some of the free voluntary work that you can do in different organizations to kind of brush up your resume a bit and help you grow there. So again, I think. It was a much needed, especially for women in Pakistan.
Right.
But it's not just limited to women in Pakistan, which is an amazing thing, or women for that matter. Of course, they
Right.
focus more on women, but in general, they're very supportive, responsive. If you have anything that you need to need any help in terms of your career growth. So yeah, can't say enough good things about
Right.
that organization.
Yeah. Right. And honestly, once somebody has experienced that value that it provides, only then somebody can actually talk from their heart, and I can totally feel that coming out from you. So with that, I thank you so much for your time and your presence here with us and sharing some thoughts with us. As far as our audience are concerned, if you like the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and pass the content around to your friends and family. Until the next episode rolls out, do buy me a coffee, to which I'll provide the link in the description. And do check us out on other streaming platforms as well. This is your host, Usama, signing off, and I will catch you in the next episode.